What if Pre-Vizsla killed Maul? In the Clone Wars, Maul successfully defeated Pre-Vizsla for possession of the darksaber and control of Death Watch. One of our viewers, though, wondered what if instead the opposite had happened and Maul was defeated by Vizsla. That's what we'll be looking at today. So grab some blue milk, cuddle up with your pet Tauntaun, and let's hop right into this Star Wars What If scenario. Our story begins in the throne room of Sundari, where Pre-Vizsla has just been challenged to a duel to the death by Maul. Naturally, as the proud Mandalorian that he is, Pre accepts Maul's challenge. The duel commences, and the pair engage in a fight that's worthy for the songs of the Mandalorian people. Vizsla bombards Maul with his special bag of Mandalorian tricks, and Maul manages to fend it off. In this timeline, Maul doesn't manage to destroy Vizsla's jetpack. This one key variable allows Vizsla to continue throwing his Mandalorian tricks at Maul. Eventually, Maul gets fed up, and he throws his saber at the Mandalorian leader in frustration. Vizsla sees this coming, and he dodges out of the way. While Maul is weaponless, he fires a few shots off at him with his blasters, catching the Dathomirian force wielder off guard. When Maul's lightsaber reaches his hand, it's already too late. Vizsla is behind him, and he slices Maul up the back with the darksaber. Maul immediately dies, his body falling to the floor. Pre-Vizsla reiterates that the only people who shall rule Mandalore are the strong, and he thrusts his saber into the air, met with applause from Death Watch. How does this impact the rest of the Star Wars story? Let's keep going to find out. Immediately after Maul dies, Vizsla orders his men to apprehend and execute both Savage and Almec, who have watched this entire ordeal go down. Almec is an easy catch. As the coward that he typically is, he surrenders quickly. He begs for his life, hoping that he can get back into Pre-Vizsla's good graces. The Mandalorian leader laughs, and he says that the ignoble scum like Almec deserved to die. Vizsla brings the darksaber down on the former Prime Minister, decapitating him. Savage, on the other hand, is a different story. Immediately after his brother dies, he cries out in rage, and he blasts the glass out of the windows with the Force. He pulls his saber into his hand from the Mandalorian who had been holding both his and Maul's, and he runs out the window, hollering with rage. Savage tells Death Watch that they will regret their actions today, and that he would stop at nothing until vengeance had been served for the death of his brother. Vizsla orders that his men pursue the Dathomirian, but they are unsuccessful. All of the Mandalorians that are sent after Savage end up dead, falling to his blade. Savage manages to get to the main starport of Sundari, fueled by rage, and steal one of the Death Watch ships before he can be apprehended. Savage jumps into hyperspace, and he sets his course for Dathomir. Meanwhile, on Mandalore, Vizsla does more than simply take the throne. He begins a complete government overhaul, changing the Mandalorian central government into what it once was. He stood at the head of government as the Mandalore, sovereign over all, and he also unites the noble houses behind his leadership. Pre is committed to re-establishing a standing military for Mandalore, and all of the young men and women of Sundari are eager to join his force. The same is true for the youth of the noble houses, who are enamored by Vizsla's charisma and vision for Mandalore. Duchess Satine, who remains in prison as a traitor to Mandalore, watches her legacy crumble, and she is sad to see that they're falling back into their old ways. She knows that this isn't sustainable for the Mandalorians, but for now, from the jail cell, all she could do was watch. Corky Satine, the nephew of the Duchess, continues Satine's ideals of pacifism in the form of peaceful protest against the government. Pre-Vizsla, seeing these small-scale protests across Sundari, especially in many of his universities, ends up declaring their movement a threat to Mandalore and a reversion to the ways that clearly hadn't worked. Death Watch ends up arresting many of the protesters who are inspired by Corky, and, in a public display of commitment to upholding the old Mandalorian ways, Vizsla executes them all, publicly, decapitating them with the darksaber. He cries again that only the strong shall be children of Mandalore, and he riles up his base. Satine sees all of this happening, and she is absolutely distraught. However, there's nothing that she can do. Corky, who hasn't yet been found by House Vizsla's regime, manages to escape Mandalore and flees to the Republic as a refugee. All of this is taking place on the backdrop of the Clone Wars. The Republic and the Separatists are still battling, and the politics of Mandalore are of little interest to the galaxy at large. However, concern is raised when Pre-Vizsla leaves the League of Neutral Systems and begins a campaign against them, attempting to bring them into what he was heralding as the new Mandalorian Empire. Many of them, having followed Duchess Satine's cries for pacifism, have incredibly small defense forces, and they almost immediately fall to the might of the united Mandalorian houses. Vizsla himself leads many of these crusades by example, illustrating to his people why he deserved to rule Mandalore. His dominion expands, and many in the galaxy begin to worry that this new wave of militarism from Mandalore will throw the entire galaxy into more turmoil. Following his humiliation at Sundari, Savage returns to Dathomir, where his clan awaits him. Following the massacre from Grievous, there are few Night Sisters left on the planet. However, Savage can sense their presence, and the spirit of Mother Talzin permeates through the entire world. Savage goes deep into the tunnels of the Night Sister caverns, and he calls on the spirits of his dead sisters for wisdom. He is greeted with a soft whisper from Talzin's ghost, telling him that not all was lost. Even though Maul was dead, Savage could still carry on the legacy of the sisters and lead the Shadow Collective to greatness. Finally, they would get their revenge on the Sith, the Separatists, the Mandalorians, and the Jedi, and Savage would be the one to lead this crusade. Reinvigorated, Savage smiles, ready to take the mantle of leadership for the disjointed collective. He calls each of the major leaders that him and Maul had recruited to Dathomir, ready to motivate them to get revenge on the Mandalorians. Meanwhile, in the Republic, Corky pleads with the Jedi Council and the Senate to provide aid to Mandalore. He says that his aunt has been unjustly held prisoner following an illegitimate coup by radical terrorists that were now causing chaos within the League of Neutral Systems, who essentially had no defense mechanisms to deter the attacks. Surely, the Republic had to have sympathy on his people. Corky makes an impassioned speech to the Senate, essentially begging that they come to his aid after the brutal violation of universal rights that had taken place under Vizsla's oversight. Sadly, the Senate doesn't hear Corky's plea. They tell him that if his world had joined the Republic in the fight against the Confederacy, then they would have been happy to help. Because they had chosen to remain neutral, though, there was nothing that they could do. Corky is extremely frustrated by this, now clearly seeing the corruption that had engulfed the Republic. After his plea in the Senate, though, he is approached by Chancellor Palpatine, who says that he could authorize the covert insertion of clone special ops to Mandalore to help restore the legitimate government and free Satine, and try to stabilize the region from Vizsla's rampage. Corky nods, believing this to be an acceptable alternative, but he still feels himself annoyed by the lack of sympathy from other members of the Senate. He remains on Coruscant, hoping that the Republic can help his people. As Vizsla's conquest of the neutral systems continues, he becomes more high on his power. He is pleased to see Mandalore's growth, and he is worshipped as a god by many of his people, the herald of a new age of prosperity for the Mandalorians. Those who refuse to join him are slaughtered mercilessly, but the ones who surrender willingly are integrated well into Mandalorian society. As evidenced by Vizsla's acceptance of Maul's victory over him in the main timeline, he isn't picky about who joins the Mandalorian culture. His philosophy is that a creed, not a bloodline, makes a Mandalorian. Many aliens are integrated into his growing dominion, and Vizsla presides over their assimilation. Due to Mandalore's monopoly on Beskar, their economy grows quite rapidly, with a high demand for their weapons and for their metal. Vizsla seems to be doing a fantastic job managing his new empire. However, one day, everything changes. As Vizsla is giving a speech to a massive crowd of adoring Mandalorian warriors on Sundari, a massive fleet of ships appears in the skies above the city. Even Vizsla is taken off guard, and he looks up to see who could possibly be interrupting his address to the greatest people of the galaxy. When he sees a collection of Hutt ships, Black Sun cruisers, Pike transport, and Crimson Dawn vessels, Vizsla growls. He knows exactly who these people are. Time had finally caught up with him, it seemed. The Shadow Collective had come to exact revenge. Vizsla looks at his people, who are gazing at him for leadership. At this, Vizsla places his black and blue helmet on his head, ignites the darksaber, points it towards the enemies, and yells a loud cry of "For Mandalore" before activating his jetpack and flying towards the threat. His people need no explanation. They cry out in anger, and they follow their leader. This would be the greatest threat that Vizsla had faced since his ascension to the Mandalorian throne. He hoped that he would be able to take on these despicable criminals for the sake of his people, and for the sake of his position as the Mandalore. In this battle, the Mandalorians proved that they are a people worthy of being called warriors. The entire population of Sundari comes out to help their ruler, and they confront the criminals who are landing on their planet head-on. Because Vizsla's speech was being televised to his entire empire, many other Mandalorians from across his dominion also come to his aid in the skies, providing ships to counter the criminal blockade. Vizsla, despite his cruel tyranny, had united a significant number of people under one vision, even if it had been through force. His conquered subjects were loyal to him because if they promised allegiance to Mandalore, then he would allow them to live freely, and to even help them out with aid from Sundari, if they ever needed it, because Mandalorians were a brotherhood. The protectors of Concord Dawn came to Vizsla's aid as well, and a battle rages in the skies and on the ground. The criminals are nowhere near as adept in combat as the Mandalorians, and they lack the Beskar that the Mandos possess. They're overwhelmed quicker than expected, but they have an ace up their sleeve: Savage Oppress. Savage united the criminals with promises of exponential wealth when they controlled the Beskar minds of Mandalore, and also appealed to their emotions by telling them that they could have revenge on the Mandalorians if they attacked now and swiftly. Savage promised them on Dathomir that he would give them riches untold, and that once they overtook Mandalore, the galaxy would be theirs. So they obliged, and here they were today, following Savage's leadership as he fought on the ground, killing many Mandalorians. This malevolent Force user, fueled by rage and the dark magics of the Night Sisters, goes on a rampage. He knocks out each of the Mandalorians that come his way, including some of the more physically adept aliens. The death of his brother has motivated him to conquer this world, no matter the cost. In addition, he wants to kill Pre-Vizsla. As the battle continues across the city of Sundari, and as more starships enter the fold in the skies above, bodies of all factions begin to litter the streets. It's like one of the Mandalorian wars of old, and Pre-Vizsla is energized by the bloodshed. He starts a bone-chilling chant of Vodan among his people, and the entire force begins to sing in unison, frightening the criminal hordes. They begin to gain the upper hand, retaking their city from below. Savage sees this, and his anger intensifies. He can't let the collective lose. Not again. In that moment, as Savage is rampaging through the city, that's when he sees Vizsla. He cries out to the Mandalorian ruler, and he challenges the man to a duel for the title of Mandalore, just as Maul had. Vizsla, being a man of honor, hears this challenge. Bo-Katan, his faithful prime minister, who's fighting alongside him, tells her ruler not to accept. However, Vizsla says that he would lose all credibility if he lost, and if he didn't accept the challenge. And he scolds Bo for her lack of faith in him. Pre reminds Bo that he had defeated this Sith's brother, and he would now destroy this scum as well. Vizsla accepts the challenge, and he rushes towards Savage. Out of principle, Savage uses only his strength and lightsaber prowess in battle. The Force gives him more clarity, but he wanted to prove to the people of Mandalore that he could do this bare knuckle, and that he truly was a stronger warrior. The two clash blades amidst the backdrop of Sundari, with the roaring flames in the background. The hum of both sabers cut through the chaos of everything around them, and it almost looks like the pair are dancing in a tragic performance. Many of the combatants stop fighting to watch, enthralled by the prowess of both warriors. For a moment, everything goes silent, except for the hum of the blades. Then, Bo-Katan begins chanting. In a surprisingly gorgeous singing voice, she begins to recite one of the songs of old, loudly enough for all of the other Mandalorians in the area to hear. Soon, the tune begins to pick up, and the other warriors start to sing as well. Savage is caught off guard by this display of Mandalorian unity and the surprising beauty of the chorus, but he maintains his composure. However, as the chant catches on, and as the Mandalorians continue to show solidarity for their leader, Savage is eventually thrown off. In his rage, he yells for the crowd to be silent, and he takes his eyes off of Pre-Vizsla. Vizsla takes advantage of this moment, and he slices Savage up the back. Just like Maul, Savage falls to the ground, killed by his lack of clarity in the Force and his thirst for revenge. Pre-Vizsla raises his darksaber high and yells "For Mandalore" before returning to combat against the criminals. After the fall of Savage, the criminals become disjointed. Their forces are uncoordinated, and their skill in the field of combat is not on par with that of the seasoned Mandalorians. Many of the criminals flee, and the Shadow Collective returns to be dispersed in the corners of the galaxy. Lots of them who surrender to the Mandalorians are offered the chance at new life, joining them under the creed of Mandalore. Some of these criminals accept, and they are embraced by Vizsla's people as brothers and sisters. The ones who refuse, however, are executed on the spot. Vizsla sees criminals as scum, but if they're willing to leave their lives and pursue purpose in the betterment of Mandalore, he respects their initiative. As Palpatine promised to Corky, Delta Squad is sent in to free Duchess Satine from Vizsla's cruel imprisonment. They land on the surface, and given the backdrop of recent events on the planet, they're able to blend in quite well. However, because Vizsla is in such a prominent position during the fight, they can't take him out. But they still can go and complete their other half of the mission, which is to free Duchess Satine. Because of all of Sundari's guards aiding Vizsla to keep the criminals at bay, the ones in the prison are indisposed when the elite clone squad arrives. They're able to quickly break Satine out of prison, telling her that they're on a special mission from the Chancellor himself on behalf of her nephew, Corky. They break out with little hassle, and they take her back to Coruscant. She protests, wanting to go back to her people and provide them with leadership. However, eventually she obliges, hoping that she can provide a reasonable plea to them from afar. The Shadow Collective, with no solid leadership, is fractured. The Hutt Council battles with leaders of the Black Sun and Pikes for control, and things begin to devolve into an all-out crime war between the ruling families of the syndicates. Dryden Voss, being the shrewd criminal that he is, and the recently appointed leader of Crimson Dawn, waits for this whole conflict to blow over, avoiding sides and continuing to bring the hand of Crimson Dawn across various systems. One day, he hoped, he could lead the Shadow Collective himself. Now, though, was not that time. He would wait, hoping that one day he could seize his opportunity. The Clone Wars rage on across the galaxy. People continue to be devastated, and the shadow of Palpatine continues to creep over the affairs of the Republic. One bright spot, though, is Corky and Satine being reunited on Coruscant. They embrace once Satine arrives in front of the Senate building, and Corky says that he had tried to get her out. Satine says that she knows, and that she knows that Vizsla had only kept her alive because he knew that it would be more agonizing for her to see the government collapse than to kill her. Satine says that they will continue to work towards the agenda of peace on Mandalore, and that they'll do it together. While Obi-Wan is currently in the Outer Rim sieges with his apprentice, he hears about Satine being freed from the grips of the Mandalorian prison, and he contacts her himself, saying that he is grateful to see that she is on Coruscant, and that he will make contact with her once he arrives on the cityscape. Satine is happy to hear from Obi-Wan, and she says that she eagerly awaits his arrival, hoping that he looks as good as the last time she saw him. Obi-Wan laughs, telling her not to act in such a flirtatious manner around him, especially not on the comms, because the Jedi might be watching. Satine obliges this, and she signs off, happy that Obi-Wan still remembers her after all of these years. How do these events impact the end of our story? Let's keep going and find out. As Palpatine's government consolidates power over the Separatists, and after the defeat of the Jedi following Order 66, Vizsla's Mandalorians remain a pain in the Empire's side. Their sovereignty is not recognized by the new tyrannical Empire, and Pre refuses to negotiate with them. Mandalorians like Gar Saxon are quick to turn on their leader, eager to consolidate their own power within the galaxy at large, but Vizsla quickly disposes of his internal challengers due to the vast majority of his population supporting the Vizsla regime, especially against the Empire. Pre becomes a respected figure across many rebel cells, and he eventually gains notoriety among the more violent rebel groups, such as the Partisans, for his brutal tactics. Satine and Corky continue to live on Coruscant, advocating for both the pacification of Mandalore and the Empire. Oftentimes, Palpatine twists her words to try and get his message across to Mandalorians. However, they are firmly under the grip of Vizsla's charismatic leadership, rejecting everything that she has to offer. Satine is not a fan of the Emperor. However, she will continue to negotiate with him and try to help him see reason from her people and to help him understand why a more pacifist government would be better for the entire galaxy. Obviously, Palpatine doesn't listen to her, but he at least entertains her, knowing that he can continue to use her in the future to try and get the Mandalorians to join the Empire and to have peace within their ranks. Another reason that Satine doesn't like the Empire is how they've treated the Jedi. Obviously, she had seen so many Jedi help her during the Clone Wars, and now they were either scattered across the galaxy being hunted down by Inquisitors, or they were dead. She wonders where her ex-lover was, Obi-Wan, whether he's alive and well, or if he had fallen to the hand of Sidious and the Inquisitors. She hopes desperately that one day she'll be able to see Obi-Wan again, and that they can be reunited and have a happy life. Possibly together, but not likely, because Obi-Wan is a man of the Jedi Code who doesn't bend despite personal feelings. Satine knows this, but she still just wants to see him again, one day, in the future. Vizsla's Mandalore continues to expand, and they're able to further their influence among other systems that secretly harbor disloyalty to Palpatine. The Empire and the Mandalorians are in a constant struggle. Both seek to conquer, and the Empire wants to impose its will on Mandalore to secure its Beskar reserves. Vizsla's leadership prevails, though, and the Mandalore keeps his people safe from harm. These two factions are constantly fighting, hoping to maintain what control they have in their respective spheres of influence. One thing that Pre's leadership has proven, though, is truly that only the strongest could unify and rule Mandalore against the rest of the galaxy's interests. After years of struggling against literally everyone, Mandalore had made a name for itself. Surely, Vizsla would be remembered in the songs for the rest of time. Hey there folks, I hope that you enjoyed today's What If scenario. If you did, it would be awesome if you could check out this other video, What If Mr. Beast Took on Jabba the Hutt? If you have any thoughts on this story, please comment them below. Would you like to see a part 2? What do you think would happen next? Have a fantastic rest of your day, fellow Star Wars fans, and as always, I hope that you've had your daily delicious dose of Bantha Stew.